Hi, Pastor Dave Munsinger here, the Care and Counseling at Cypress Bible Church. Today's devotion is titled No Future Without Forgiveness. It's based on this book that I read 20 years ago by Desmond Tutu. He wrote the book through their experiences in South Africa as they had ended apartheid, and they knew that they could not bring justice. And it sounds like there's so much division in this country today. There's divisions in families, there's divisions in churches, there's divisions in schools. Everywhere we look, we're a nation and a people divided. And he realized that you can't have justice. Okay, they could never accomplish justice, but he could give the country something better: forgiveness. That people had to begin forgiving one another. And as people began to forgive one another, the healing would come. And so I'm going to take a look at two passages for us. One is from Colossians chapter 1, verse 21 and 22. The Apostle Paul writes, "You who were once alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, Christ has now reconciled you through his body of the flesh by his death, in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach." What a great passage. This is truly the gospel, where we were once, as some theologians would say, that we were depraved, right? We were unable to do the righteous things that God requires. And so that's depravity. It's not meaning total evilness. It can, but we were just completely cast off from God. We couldn't do that what was right. We were hostile in mind. We were committed to doing evil deeds. And certainly we've witnessed a lot of hostility in the last few weeks, and we've seen a lot of evil deeds. But Paul tells us, but you were reconciled by Christ, and he accomplished this through his death on the cross. And now we've been presented to God holy and blameless and without reproach. And so we're able to walk as Christians without any guilt, without any shame. And when we do commit sins, we're able to freely confess them because we know that we've been forgiven. And if we sin against somebody, we can go to them and say, "I'm sorry, please forgive me. How can I make it right?" And so this is very powerful in helping us to be peacemakers, which Christ has called us to do. And he's called us to be peacemakers, and that means to be agents of bringing God's forgiveness wherever we go. We're to be priests in our world. Wherever we have influence, wherever we have relationships, I think Christ calls the believer to be a priest, to bring forgiveness, to bring reconciliation. And Paul continues this theme in Galatians chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. He says, "Brothers and sisters, if someone's caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore him gently. But watch yourself, or you may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." Well, let's unpack that. What's the law of Christ? It's practicing the golden rule. It's loving God first and loving your neighbor second. Okay, it's the fulfillment of the 10 Commandments, but that's what's meant there. And so he's saying, brothers, someone's caught in sin, you who are spiritual, meaning you who understand and have believed, you should practice the gospel with this person who's caught in a sin, who's in a place that needs to be reconciled. And he said, but watch yourself, you can get tempted. So let me give you 3 steps on how to be a reconciler, how to bring forgiveness into relationships. And then I'll give you a story to illustrate. The 3 steps is practicing the SOG method, S-O-G. Be self-aware, be others-aware, be God-aware. And that's really what Paul's telling us here. Watch yourself so you're not tempted, right? Be others-aware, seeing that they might be in sin, but then be God-aware, knowing that you're spiritual and that you have to look to the gospel to lead you. So as you approach somebody where there needs to be reconciliation and forgiveness, be self-aware. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? How am I affected by this? Right? So this keeps you from just reacting. So it keeps you from just being visceral. And so that means you won't be tempted to sin. Then Be others aware. Think about the other person. What might they be thinking? What might they be feeling? How might they have gotten to this place of unreconciliation and where they're in need of forgiveness and need of peacemaking? Then he says, then we should be God aware. What does the scripture say? How would Christ act in this matter? How do we be peacemakers? And we look to God for his leadership and guidance in being a reconciler. So let me give you the illustration. The Desert Fathers, they were a group of monks living out in the Egyptian desert from about 276, started by Anthony the Great, through about 500 or so AD. There's still some monasteries there. But anyhow, there was one monk who was caught in sin by other monks, and they had evidence on him of being caught in a pretty grievous sin. So this group of monks went to their leader. His name was Moses, and they went to him and presented the case, and he says, yes, we must go and restore our brother gently, as the scripture says, because he's in sin, but let me prepare myself for the journey to go and visit him. They had about an hour's walk to go see this other monk. And so he gets a knapsack, fills it full of sand, and then punctures it with a knife and puts a little hole in the bottom of it, puts it on his shoulders and say, okay, brothers, let's go. And along the way, the other monks are kind of like, well, this is odd. And they said, Brother Moses, why the knapsack full of sand? And we don't get it. And he said, well, on our journey to approach our brother who's in sin, I need to be reminded of the full weight of sin that I once carried before Christ. And I need to experience how Christ has removed that weight of sin from me and have my load lightened when I approach my brother. That's how we go and approach people. That's being self-aware, it's being others aware, it's being God aware. Remember the sins that we have once carried, how we were once hostile in mind and did evil deeds, and we go to restore people gently. May we be reconciled with one another. May we help to reconcile our nation. May we help to reconcile our church. I do pray that you would be desirous to come back and worship with us. It is time to come back to the house of the Lord and to worship him. I think the people of God not worshiping for the last 3 months together has brought about some serious repercussions for it. I think it is essential that we return to worship. And may God bless you, may God bless our church, and may God bless our country.